Hey everybody, welcome back to Sword Wolf Forge. Today we're going to be doing our third video in our Bladesmithing 101 series. What is the Bladesmithing 101 series? It's for beginners and new people to the hobby, to where I've made the mistakes so you don't have to. So today we're going to be talking about planning. What is planning? Well, you ever seen The Dirty Dozen where Lee Marvin has the big stick out and he's got a castle and he's pointing to things and numbering and everything like that? It's kind of like that, except for I don't have a stick, I don't have a model castle, and I'm not Lee Marvin. But seriously though, this is a very crucial step in the bladesmithing process. We never want to go into things half-cocked. There was a saying we had in the military, you probably heard it before, but prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. That applies to about anything when you really think about it. So anyway, what we're going to do is I'm going to run down some steps that I go through. And quite honestly, I don't care what skill level you are, every bladesmith goes through this phase. Now, it's going to be longer for you because you haven't done it before. But eventually what this will do is help you get into a routine or some muscle memory so you can do it a lot quicker the next time you try to start out. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, the first thing that we want to ask ourselves when we start our planning phase is, what is this knife going to be used for? Is it going to be used for hunting, kitchen, you name it? What's it going to be used for? And that's really going to help us when we are designing the knife. You've ever heard the term, pick the right tool for the right job? Well, that also applies with knives. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to look at, these are a couple of my knives that I've made. And you can see there is such a variety in styles, shapes, size, everything. And they're all knives. But each knife is designed for its own job. For example, like this kitchen knife, I would not use to clear out brush. This knife right here would be optimal for clearing out brush. This cleaver would be good for, you name it, cleaving meat. Wouldn't be good for skinning a rabbit. So whether you're making this knife for yourself or for a customer, you need to ask them or yourself, what am I going to be using this knife for? And that's really going to help you speed up the process of designing the knife. To expand on that thought a little bit more, I've drawn out just several of the different blade profiles that are out there. There's many, many more out there. But these are some of the more common ones. And I'm not going to go over every single one of them, but I'm sure you can recognize most of these already, especially if you're interested in knife making. But if you do look at the blade profiles, you can almost tell just by the profile what that knife is designed for, especially like if you look at a dagger. I mean, daggers are meant for piercing and scaring the hell out of people, but mainly piercing. Versus like more of your hunters are going to be in the normal straight or the drop point. So again, this is what we're going to be looking at when we want to design our knife. The next thing we want to consider are tangs. No, not the orange stuff that astronauts drink. Tangs are how we mount our handles. We've got to be able to hold on to the knife. So there are different kinds of tangs out there. This one is a full tang. So basically, it's the whole profile of the wood or whatever material I want to attach on here. This is an example of one that's finished. As you can see, you can still see the steel all the way around. One of several advantages to making full-tang knives. One is I personally believe they're stronger. You have a lot more steel here to absorb shock, support the blade, whatever you're going to use it for. They're easier. They're a lot easier, and it's highly recommended as a beginner you start with a full tang. The downside is they are heavier. So sometimes what you might want to do to kind of get some balance and everything, you might drill some extra holes in here. I've seen people grind little grooves in here just to lighten things up a little bit. Now I'm going to show you a picture of one of my what's called a hidden-tang knife or hidden-tang blade. If you look here, you can see that the tang is a lot thinner and a lot shorter. It doesn't even go the full length of the handle. What this allows you to do, though, is one, you can put a guard a lot easier onto the knife. It's lighter, but in my opinion, it doesn't give you as much structural support and is a lot more labor intensive and something that I would recommend to someone that's been doing this for some time. Another blade in this picture is called a through tang. As you can see, you can't see it going through the complete handle. I'll show you a completed picture later. But the tang is still thin. It's a lot longer. And it will actually go all the way through the handle material to where you can screw on a butt cap or a locking nut on the end to compress everything together. Now these are very complicated as well, and I don't feel that they give you as much structural support either. But they're very nice. You can really show your craftsmanship, but it is for not the beginner. And here's a picture of the completed knife. Okay, so we've talked about blade profile. We've also talked about handle tangs. So next step, we're going to get over and start getting an idea of, and doing some drawing about how we're going to go about making our first knife. So up till now, we've been talking about different blades and blade designs. What kind of functions do they do? And things that we need to start thinking about when we start drawing out our knife. But we haven't gotten to the handle part yet, and that's 50% of it at least. There's a lot of features on here and things you need to think about when you're designing your knife. You got to think about this. This is where I actually come in contact. I have physical contact with my knife. So I want things to be comfortable. I want it to be usable. So I'm going to take you over the table, kind of go over some different shapes of handles that I use, some of the pros and cons of that, and then we'll get started on actually drawing out a knife that we're going to make together. Let's go over to the table again. So as we were talking about earlier when we were talking about knife profiles and the different jobs they can perform and such, we also want to keep this in mind when we are designing our handle. What kind of job or what type of knife are we making? If you notice that a kitchen knife has a different type of handle than a hunting knife or a fighting knife, that's because it's used a different way. So we want to keep this in mind when we're designing our handle. I have 5 different types of handles here, and there's even more, but these are some of the more common ones that I use. And as you can see, there's a lot of different variety there. On the top, this is more of a kitchen style knife. We're not going to be slashing. We're not going to be hacking. We're going to be doing more finesse. So I have a more slim design, smoother design. One thing we want to keep in mind also is the width of your hand is usually between 4 to 4.5 inches. So that being said, if I want to make a bigger full-tang knife, such as like this knife, this is one of my first knives I ever made. I still use it today. Or these knives right here, I want to be able to accommodate my full hand. Why do I want to do that? Because if I'm going to be like chopping on wood or perhaps slashing or something, I might be muddy, I might be wet. I want to put features into these handles to where I can still, one, I can control the blade, but also it gives me index points. So if you look at, I've done this 3 different ways on these handles. This one right here, I've got an indentation right here, so I can index it very well between my fingers. This one's a little bit more smooth, but I have a nice contour back here to prevent the blade from slipping out of my hand. And on this Nesmuk here, I've done something even different. I put more of like a finger notch in the front. And I still have it cutting back here a little bit as well. Now also keep in mind that you might not always be holding your knife like this. So when you're designing this, you also want to accommodate like this. And the same thing. And it fits still very nice. Now we're going to be getting into more of like the fit and finish when we get to our handle section of this instructional videos. But these are things you want to keep in mind, especially measurements. Now with this, you can have a smaller handle. There's no problem with that. But if you notice that I didn't drop anything down, create any kind of notches back here, because it fits more in the palm of my hand. So if I were to do something like this, it could create some hot spots. It might irritate my hand, dig into it. I can still hold it very nice and comfortable. I can even index it with my thumb, and it'll be comfortable. So a very important thing, you don't, want to have your own knife. A knife is not designed to hurt you. It also wants to feel comfortable. So keep these things in mind, because I mean, I've had people go to my tables before, pick up a knife, that knife didn't fit very well. They put it back down. Versus I've had people that, oh, they love the fit. And that's the first thing they say, man, this feels great. So we need to keep this in mind when we are designing. It's just as important as the blade design itself. Okay, so now we got some shapes, profiles, what does what on a knife kind of thing. And that's going to give us a better idea what we want, what we're looking for when we're going to be designing our first knife. Now, before I go into that, if you grew up in the 80s or the 90s like I did, you definitely saw Rambo. And for some of you, that might have even inspired you to be a knife maker. That was a really cool knife, but you know what that really was? A piece of art. And that's it. I have made 0 Rambo knives, even though I get requests for them all the time. What we want to do here, especially since we're beginners, new to this, is, again, you hear me say it before, but keep it simple, stupid. Also, though, set yourself up for success, not failure. By keeping the design simple at first, you're going to develop better habits, have better results, and you're going to be happier. What I'm drawing out right now is a design that is very versatile. You can make a lot of different knives out of this one profile by just changing a couple things. And so this will help you get some good building blocks. So I'm going to move you over to the table, show you what we got, and get it rolling. So I've already drawn out most of this stuff for you because nobody wants to see me draw for a half hour. But this is how, and if you've seen some of my videos, this is how I set up most of my design phase. We got an overall length. Our overall length for this project could be 7.5 inches, blade 4 inches, handle 3.5 inches, and height is going to be roughly 1.5 inches. Now this is going to be a stock cut knife. We're going to cut this out. We're not going to forge it. But what I usually do, and you can do this for a couple different reasons. I'll measure out 7.5 inches, about 1.5 inches height on the paper, measure out 3.5 inches, and then of course you'll have 4 inches. So you can kind of see, get an idea how this is going to fit. And if it doesn't look right to you or whatever, you can always adjust these. But this will give you a pretty good idea how this is going to look when you draw this. Either draw it out on steel, or if you like, you can cut this out. If you really like that shape, it's dead on, cut that shape out, and then you can put it on steel, which we'll be doing in the next video anyway. Now, the reason I told you this is a really good beginner profile is, now this is a blade, this is modeled off this blade here that I actually forged out, liked the design, and traced it out so I could use it for future reference. As you can see on this blade a little bit, and I'll zoom it in for you, I've just put a little bit of a notch up there and a false edge. So I drew out a couple other of these here, and you can see just by doing a couple little things to this simple design, you can really change your profile. If I want to make more of a clip point, I can cut it out, and you can see I've got a little bit different profile there. Or you can do what I did up there. You can notch it out, put yourself a little thumb index. But it's the same basic design. And it's the same thing when we get into bevels. You can have a lower bevel right here, and you can keep them straight down. You can put them in an angle like I did on this blade. You can bring the bevels all the way up. There's a lot of things you can do with just this simple design. And you can do the same thing with the handle. I mean, if you want, you can make the handle longer. You can extend it out here if you like. If you want to put a finger index there, you're more than welcome to. But you see, you can base almost everything just off of this design. And when you're starting, that makes things so much easier than starting from the drawing board every single time. You can base something off of something simple and expand on it. Before we conclude, I want to get everybody set up for the next video that we're going to be bringing out as soon as I can get on it, where we actually will start applying all these things that we've learned and putting it into the shop and into a knife. So the next video, if you want to participate along with us, you'll need a piece of high carbon steel. I'm going to be using 3/16 by 1.5 inches and probably about 8 inches of it. You can have longer if you want, doesn't matter. You're going to, again, we're going to be doing stock removal. We're not going to be forging. Now, if you want to forge it out, by all means do it. Nothing wrong with that. But you're going to need something to cut the knife out with. Cut the profile or shape it or whatever. A lot of times I'll use an angle grinder to get the rough edges, and then I'll take it over to my 2x72 and clean everything up. So you're going to want to have at least an angle grinder. You're going to need a small punch. We're going to be punching holes to drill our pinholes in our handles. You'll need a hammer. Drill press is preferred. You want straight drill holes through these. You don't want them at an angle. Throw your pins off. 3/16 metal drill bit. And forge and anvil are suggested, but they are not mandatory. I know that I said that this is going to be stock removal, but there are times that I get this steel and there is a slight warp in the steel. And we want to address that as soon as possible before we get into heat treating and such. So That's what you'll need for the next video. So we've gone over a lot of information, went over profiles, designs, what does what, pick the right tool for the job, set yourself up for success, not failure, keep it simple. So there's a lot to ingest, and this information is very, very condensed, okay? I mean, there are books just on knife profiles. But what I'm trying to do is whittle away all that excess noise and make it easier to understand for somebody that is just starting out, and all this will click in time. You can watch this video over again if you can stand aside of me, but it all builds on top of each other, and pretty soon it'll start clicking. So thanks again for tuning in, and stay sharp, everybody.